Ladies and gentlemen, this RedGaming.com video. Let us discuss the PlayStation 4 and resolution and frame rate. So, I'm sure we've all heard by now about the Xbox One and PS4 war in terms of the frame rate. Obviously, Microsoft are keen to downplay the resolution and frame rate differences between the two consoles. Sony haven't really said that much. Obviously, we've had the recent Tomb Raider fiasco with it running considerably lower frame rate. We've had issues with like Call of Duty, Battlefield, which are running at lower resolution, and Microsoft have been keen to downplay that. They've said quite specifically, you know, first of all, the games are the most important, which I'd agree with, and second of all, it's very early in the generation to call any of this. Fergal Gara, however, from Sony's camp, isn't feeling the same way. He's from Sony's UK's marketing director, so obviously it's his job to put some positive spin on it from the perspective of Sony. And he's highly boastful, actually, about the PS4's achievements. He said when the lead system architect, Mark Cerny, stood up and said that he spent 5 years listening to games developers, listening to what they want for the next generation device, and then they did their damnedest to build that. He said it's very important listening to games developers. As simple as that. The PlayStation 4 is easy to develop for, and it's performing and packing the punch that developers want. Furthermore, he points out that they believe that they've come up with the right product at the right price for the right core audience, and that's gotten them off to a strong start. We think we've done that very, very well, but that's not the whole job. A strong start is invaluable, but it definitely isn't the whole job. At this stage, the PlayStation 3's life cycle versus the Xbox 360, we hadn't even launched. We were 16 months behind. End quote for a second. So, of course, what he's referring to there is that, you know, when the Xbox 360 launched, the PlayStation 3 was nowhere to be seen. Sony were only competing with the PS2. The Xbox 360 pretty much had like a clean run for over a year, basically 18 months, a year and a half, 16 months, but let's just call it a year and a half to do whatever the hell it wanted with. That means it could get system updates out, Microsoft could get a strong online presence with Xbox Live, and so on and so forth. And honestly, there was a lot of talk of, can Sony even compete? Even when the PS3 finally launched, many would agree that the launch wasn't that smooth, there wasn't enough games out compared to the Xbox 360, which didn't have the best launch lineup, but by that point, of course, it was starting to really have games like Gears of War and other titles that were very impressive. And the PS3 felt kind of lackluster. The UI was a bit ew as well. The system felt a little bit uncomfortable to use, to be honest, compared to the Xbox 360, which was a more refined experience. Fast forward a few years, however, and Sony had certainly started to put a lot of implementations in place with the PlayStation 3 and a lot of really good first-party exclusives. They'd fixed the system update, made it use less resources, improved the APIs and the actual libraries to actually allow developers to use the bloody thing, which was one of the big issues of the machine, particularly at launch. And so eventually they managed to catch up, and pretty much both systems have done fairly well, to say the least. And he pointed out that a lot can be achieved, millions of consoles can be achieved despite a poor start, and we certainly had that the last time around. And this is certainly the case, considering that Microsoft are certainly not out of it. You're hearing a lot of news right now that Microsoft, you know, okay, their systems are being outsold, you know, 1.5 PlayStation 4s compared to like one Xbox One. But that's not enough to call anything yet. I mean, the systems have not even been released for 6 months. It's nowhere near 6 months, but even 6 months down the line, it's going to be too early to call this, let alone at this point. And Sony know that they can't just be doing what the hell they want. They have to certainly be a bit careful. You know, they can't take things for granted. On the other hand, regarding the frame rate thing, it's an issue that I raised a while back, because from the perspective of, let's say, right now, and let's just be honest, if you've got the money to buy either system. Let's just assume that you want to buy one system now. Because honestly, I think for most people, buying both is probably not really worth it because there's not enough exclusives yet. In a year, 2 years' time, most likely it's more than worth to buy both systems. But right now, there's simply not enough exclusive titles to really make it worthwhile. I'm not saying to buy the Xbox One, I'm not saying to buy the PS4, I'm just saying for a lot of people, if you're on a tighter budget, it's probably not worth it. And that's the issue that I think Microsoft are having. Because they're running this ad right now, save 100, trade in your PS3 and get $100 towards the Xbox One. And that sounds great in theory, but the problem is, of course, the PlayStation 4 is cheaper than the Xbox One already. And so mentally, you can just say, well, okay, I could just keep my PS3. And to be honest, most stores will offer a trade-in anyway. I personally don't really think it's worth the deal with the crappy prices they give you in trade-in. But hey, more power to you if that's what you desire to do. And the bottom line is, if you're on a limited budget, a finite budget, which a lot of people are, you either in college or school or whatever, you've got a finite budget to buy things with. The bottom line is you can't really justify buying both systems. And if you're only going to buy one, it makes sense to buy the system. It makes sense to just buy the system that's going to provide you the better experience. And obviously, right now, I personally believe that the titles that are out in terms of exclusivity are roughly the same. I don't mean that in terms of they're exactly the same games. I mean that I think they're about as good as each other. Personally, I think the Xbox One has a very slight edge, and I do mean very slight. It's certainly, pretty much a toss-up. On the other hand, from the perspective of, the the multi-platform titles, it's like, well, right now, the PS4 is simply just performing better. It's as simple as that. Even if you're a massive Microsoft fan, you have to admit that the titles are just running better. Whether it's going to be the case in a year's time, it's unknown. So I think that's the issue. That doesn't mean that the Xbox One's a bad buy. For example, if you like the whole TV integration, if you like Kinect and so on, then of course it's a fantastic purchase. The problem is, for a lot of people, they're just not interested in that. It's kind of that simple. A lot of people, not really their thing. What they would rather do is just sit there, play the games in the best possible resolution, the best looking graphics. And I think that, Fergal Gara has a point there. Microsoft, I personally believe they should have made a few different decisions. I honestly believe the PlayStation 4 isn't a perfect machine either. That's another topic, but I don't believe that Sony got everything right either. But I do believe that Microsoft should have maybe bumped up the specifications of their GPU and memory a little bit. And the bottom line is, in situations like this, the easier to develop machine, especially for smaller indie studios which have very finite budgets, couple of people basically working on the damn game, they're going to go with the easier platform, especially as in the perspective of Sony at the start with the indie developers, they really did support them better. And Microsoft had quite a prohibitive policy, really, with indies, where they actually needed a publisher, even if they had pretty much the financial clout themselves to do what they needed to do. And I think that Microsoft are definitely course correcting, they are improving things, but they have a long way to go. And once again, I would like to reiterate, this is not Microsoft's death sentence. It's been a couple of weeks, basically, since the system's launch, okay? Exaggerating a little bit, but, I mean, let's just be honest. It's not even been 3 months. And by the time, 6 months, 12 months, it's still not going to be enough to call anything, because right now we just don't have the exclusives, and honestly, it's going to be the exclusives, it's going to be the whole experience. So, I think Sony are right. Don't call anything yet. But it's certainly an advantage to them right now. But I do hope Microsoft pulls something out. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.